Have you ever woken up from a dream that felt completely alien to your personal life? Not a dream about missing a deadline or running late for a flight or arguing with an old friend, but a dream that felt ancient. A dream where you were standing on the edge of a vast obsidian ocean under two pale moons, or wandering through a subterranean stone labyrinth guided by a towering figure wrapped in hooded robes. Or watching a silent, golden serpent coil around a burning tree in the middle of a barren desert. When you wake up from a dream like that, the emotional aftertaste does not disappear with your morning coffee. It lingers in your chest for days, or even weeks. It leaves you with a strange feeling of reverence, or perhaps an uncanny sense of dread. It does not feel like random brain noise or forgotten daily stress. It feels heavy. It feels sacred. And most strangely of all, it feels deeply, hauntingly familiar. Even though you have never seen those places, those creatures, or those symbols anywhere in your waking existence. Most of modern psychology and neuroscience will tell you that dreams are simply neural side effects. They will tell you that your brain is consolidating memories from the past 48 hours, clearing out metabolic waste, or processing lingering emotional anxiety. And for the vast majority of your nightly dreams, that explanation is completely true. But Carl Gustav Jung, the legendary Swiss psychiatrist, realized over a century ago that not all dreams are created equal. He discovered that beneath the noisy, chaotic surface of our daily thoughts lies an abyss of human experience. He realized that occasionally the private door of your personal mind opens up, and you fall into a dream that does not belong to you alone. You fall into a dream that belongs to the entire human species. Carl Jung made a sharp distinction between two entirely different categories of human dreams. He called the first category personal dreams or small dreams. These are the dreams that draw their material exclusively from what Jung called the personal unconscious. Your personal unconscious is your own private storage room. It holds everything you have personally experienced since the day you were born. It contains your suppressed childhood memories, your hidden insecurities, your forgotten conversations, and the emotional tensions of your current life. When you dream that your car brakes are failing, or that you are trapped in an elevator, or that your teeth are falling out, your personal unconscious is speaking to you. It is wrestling with your daily ego, your career stress, your romantic anxieties, and your personal fears. Small dreams are crucial for our mental health. They are the mind's way of balancing our daily emotional ledgers. But every once in a while, something incredible happens in the silence of the night. The delicate floor of your personal unconscious cracks open. The personal ego steps aside, and your sleeping consciousness sinks into a far older, deeper layer of the human psyche. Jung called the second category big dreams. These are the dreams that originate directly from the collective unconscious. To understand what a big dream is, you must first understand what Jung meant by the collective unconscious. Jung proposed that human beings are not born as blank slates. We do not enter this world with empty minds, waiting to be filled entirely by personal experience. Just as our physical bodies are built upon millions of years of biological evolution, with organs, nervous systems, and instincts inherited from our ancestors, our minds also carry an evolutionary architecture. The collective unconscious is the inherited psychological structure of the human species. It is a vast, shared reservoir of ancestral memories, instincts, and symbolic patterns that exists beneath all individual cultures, languages, and eras. Whether you were born in modern New York, ancient Egypt, medieval Europe, or a remote island in the Pacific, the deep basement of your mind is built from the exact same blueprint. Inside this collective basement live what Jung called the archetypes. Archetypes are not fixed images or literal memories of dead ancestors. Rather, they are inherited, universal patterns of instinctual energy and human possibility. They are the psychological organs of the species. They are the primordial templates of human experience, the archetype of the great mother, the wise old man, the shadow, the hero, the trickster, the divine child, and the self. When you have a big dream, your personal identity steps back and an archetype steps forward. You are no longer just processing your personal weekly schedule. You are tapping into the universal library of human myth. You are dreaming the eternal dreams of humanity. To see how Jung arrived at this astounding conclusion, we have to go back to the early 1900s, when Jung was working as a senior physician at the Berg-Holzli Psychiatric Hospital in Zurich. At the hospital, Jung was treating a man diagnosed with severe schizophrenia. This patient had no higher education and possessed no knowledge of classical history or ancient languages. One day, the patient walked up to Jung, pulled him to a window, and pointed up at the midday sun. The man told Jung to squint his eyes and move his head from side to side. He said that if Jung moved his head, he would see a massive phallus attached to the sun, swinging back and forth, and that this swinging movement was the true source of the wind. At the time, Jung simply documented the patient's strange statement as a curious, psychotic hallucination. But several years later, Jung was reading through a newly published translation of an obscure, ancient Greek religious text, a 2,000-year-old Mithraic liturgy. As Jung read through the ancient magic formulas, he froze in utter shock. There, printed on the page before him, was an exact description of the ancient ritual vision. The text instructed the initiate to look at the sun and described seeing a tube or phallus hanging down from the solar disk, moving toward the east and west, generating the global winds. Jung knew for a fact that his uneducated patient could not possibly have read this text. The ancient manuscript had not even been translated into German or published anywhere accessible at the time the patient spoke those words. The similarity was far too specific to be a random coincidence. Jung realized that the mind of this isolated, mentally ill man had spontaneously generated an identical symbolic image that had been worshipped thousands of years earlier by ancient mystical cults in the Mediterranean. The image had not been learned through education. It had been inherited through the deep structure of the human mind. The symbol was hardwired into the psychological DNA of our species. This discovery shattered the conventional psychological models of Jung's era. It proved that beneath our personal memories, our unique personalities, and our cultural training, we are all walking through the exact same underlying mental landscape. We are all living out the same archetypal stories. When a big dream occurs, these ancient symbolic patterns light up inside your sleeping brain. In a personal dream, a dog might represent your childhood pet that passed away. But in an archetypal dream, a massive black hound guarding a stone gateway represents something far older. It represents the mythic guardian of the underworld, the archetype of death and transformation, seen in the ancient Greek Cerberus or the Egyptian Anubis. In a personal dream, muddy water might represent your fear of a flooded basement. But in a big dream, a rising, unstoppable ocean engulfing whole continents represents the primordial abyss, the great mythological flood that dissolves the old, rigid ego structure so that a new consciousness can be reborn. Notice how these mythic images appear spontaneously across cultures that had absolute zero contact with one another. The legend of the Great Deluge, the perilous journey into the dark forest, the battle with the aquatic dragon, the cosmic tree of life, and the magical transformation of the hidden orphan. Native American mythologies, ancient Mesopotamian epics, African folklore, Chinese legends, and Norse sagas all share these precise structural elements. When you experience a big dream, your individual psyche is borrowing the timeless poetic vocabulary of universal mythology to communicate a profound internal reality to you. Now, why do these extraordinary dreams happen? Why does the collective unconscious suddenly burst through the floor of your ordinary sleeping mind? Jung observed through decades of clinical work that big dreams do not happen by accident. They almost always appear during critical crossroad moments in human life. They arrive when your personal ego is completely stuck, exhausted, or facing an existential crisis that ordinary, everyday logic cannot solve. They happen during early childhood, when the fragile ego is first organizing itself. They happen during late adolescence, when an individual must break away from the family tribe to venture into the unknown world. They occur during midlife, when the career and identity you worked so hard to build suddenly feel hollow, prompting a desperate search for deeper meaning. And they arrive during severe grief, life-threatening illness, or profound moral choices. When your personal conscious mind runs out of answers, your psyche reaches back millions of years into its evolutionary roots. It summons the collective intelligence of the species. The collective unconscious sends an archetypal dream to forcibly rip your perspective out of your narrow daily ego and align you with a far greater, eternal human pattern. It is important here to pause and make a necessary distinction. Jung insisted that his concept of the collective unconscious was an empirical hypothesis based on clinical observation, not a magical or superstitious doctrine. Modern neuroscience tends to dismiss archetypes as mere pattern-seeking neural architecture, viewing dreams primarily as random electrochemical firings during rapid eye movement sleep. Furthermore, popular culture has often oversimplified Jung's work. Many modern self-help systems have reduced Jung's dynamic ideas into static, artificial categories, such as rigid lists of 12 archetypes or simplified personality typing systems. Jung himself never viewed archetypes as fixed cardboard characters in a storybook. To Jung, archetypes were fluid, living fields of emotional energy, mysterious, instinctual currents that take on unique cultural shapes in every era. Jung did not ask us to accept his theories on blind faith, nor did he claim to have proven supernatural phenomena. He simply observed that the human mind naturally organizes deep psychological experiences using a shared, symbolic language, a language that transcends individual biography. Sometimes, a big dream does not just reflect an individual crisis. Jung believed that during times of massive social upheaval, war, or cultural collapse, the collective unconscious of entire populations becomes intensely agitated. In the late spring and autumn of 1913, long before the outbreak of global conflict, Jung experienced a series of horrifying, recurring waking visions and vivid dreams. He saw a monstrous flood covering all the low-lying lands between the North Sea and the Alps. He saw the cold, yellow waters of the flood turning into literal blood, filled with thousands of drowned human bodies and destroyed civilizations. At first, Jung deeply worried that he was losing his sanity and sliding into a personal psychotic break. But when World War I violently exploded across Europe in the summer of 1914, Jung understood what had actually happened. His personal mind had tapped into the subterranean tension, the collective foreboding and psychological pressure of an entire continent on the brink of catastrophic self-destruction. When society undergoes immense collective trauma, uncertainty, or technological dislocation, the deep, ancient waters of the collective unconscious begin to churn in all of us. The big dreams that flood human sleep during such eras are the psyche's way of processing collective shock and searching for psychic equilibrium. So, how do you recognize if a dream you recently had was a personal small dream or a collective big dream? Big dreams leave behind unmistakable psychological footprints. First, they possess an overwhelming sense of numinosity. Numinosity is a word Jung borrowed to describe a feeling of mysterious, awe-inspiring, or sacred power. When you wake from a big dream, you do not feel amused or casually curious. You feel humbled. You feel as though you have been brought into the presence of something vastly older and wiser than your waking ego. Second, big dreams are characterized by absolute clarity and vividness. While personal dreams are often blurry, fragmented, and quickly forgotten within 5 minutes of waking up, big dreams stay etched in your memory for decades. Decades later, you can still recall the exact hue of the sky, the texture of the stone, and the profound emotional weight of that single moment. Third, big dreams feature archetypal motifs rather than everyday objects. Instead of your childhood home, your current office, or your family car, you encounter primal landscapes, towering mountains, endless oceans, ancient ruins, deep caverns, or cosmic skies. Instead of your real-life friends or coworkers, you encounter archetypal figures: the mysterious guide, the terrifying shadow beast, the glowing child, the devouring mother, or the regal monarch. So what should you actually do when you experience one of these monumental, haunting dreams? How do you work with a dream that feels larger than life itself? The most common mistake people make is trying to interpret a big dream using literal, personal logic. If you dream that a giant silver wolf is standing in a snowy forest staring into your soul, you do not ask yourself, "When did I last see a dog in my neighborhood?" That is personal reductionism. It drains the dream of its living power. Instead, Jung advocated for a method called amplification. Amplification is the practice of taking a dream symbol and connecting it to historical, mythological, religious, and cultural contexts. You ask yourself, what has the symbol of the wolf, the serpent, the tower, or the dark waters meant across human history? How did ancient mythologies treat this exact image? When you amplify a dream symbol, you lift your personal struggle out of your isolated, lonely ego and you place it inside the grand, timeless story of humanity. You realize that the terrifying crisis or deep transition you are facing right now is not your private failure. It is the classic heroic ordeal that millions of human beings have navigated for thousands of years. If you wish to integrate a big dream into your life, consider these 3 reflective questions. First, what timeless human story or archetypal conflict am I currently repeating in my waking life? Are you playing the role of the tragic martyr, the arrogant king who refuses to change, the reluctant hero running away from responsibility, or the seeker searching for lost truth? Second, what neglected energy from the collective unconscious is demanding to be integrated into my character? Is the terrifying monster in your dream actually your own unexpressed power, your shadow, demanding to be owned and disciplined? Is the wise guide warning you that your cold intellectual lifestyle is starving your instincts and your soul? Third, what small, outgrown part of my ego must I sacrifice so that a larger self can be born? Big dreams almost always demand a sacrifice. They demand that you let go of an outdated self-image, a toxic habit, an overly rigid worldview, or a childish demand for comfort so that you can step into psychological maturity. However, Carl Jung issued a serious warning regarding these profound dreams. He warned against what he called psychic inflation. Inflation occurs when a person experiences a big dream and mistakenly believes that their personal ego is special, holy, or chosen. They mistake the ancient power of the collective archetype for their own personal grandeur. They start viewing themselves as a prophet, a mystic, or an elevated spiritual master, falling into spiritual narcissism. Jung reminded us that you are not the archetype. You are merely the vessel through which the archetype is briefly passing. The goal of Jungian psychology is never to retreat into the fantasy realm of myths, gods, and monsters. The ultimate goal is always integration. The goal is to bring the eternal light discovered in the deep ocean of the collective unconscious back up to the surface and use it to chop wood, carry water, pay bills, and love the concrete human being sitting right in front of you. You must bring the wisdom of the ancient stars down into the soil of your daily earth. If you are currently going through a season of life where your dreams feel vast, unsettling, or deeply mythic, take heart. You are not losing your mind. You are not broken. Your psyche is simply doing what the human mind has done for hundreds of thousands of years. It is reaching down into the ancestral bedrock to find the strength, the resilience, and the symbolic wisdom you need to survive your current storm. You are not an isolated, accidental island floating alone in a cold cosmos. Beneath the dark surface of the ocean, your individual roots reach down into the same ancient continent as every human being who has ever lived, suffered, triumphed, and dreamed before you. When you dream the big dreams of humanity, you are being gently reminded that you belong to an unbroken epic continuum of human consciousness. Listen to the ancient symbols, respect the quiet, deep intelligence of your sleeping mind, and walk back into your waking day with the quiet confidence of someone who carries the living memory of humanity inside their heart.